There is this comforting lie I think a lot of us tell ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's the idea that if you are good at your job, like
Yeah.
truly competent, and you have good intentions, that's enough.
Right.
If I'm a great manager in New York, I'll be a great manager in Nairobi. If I can teach a classroom in London, I can just walk into a classroom in Lima and get the exact same results.
Yeah. That's the logic.
It feels like skills should just be transferable, right?
Yeah.
Like a USB drive you just plug into a different computer.
It's a very efficient way to think. It really is.
Okay.
It saves us a lot of mental energy because it suggests we don't really have to change, we just have to move.
Exactly.
But if we look at the stack of articles and research we're diving into today, that assumption isn't just wrong. The authors argue it is actually dangerous.
Dangerous is a strong word to start with, but after reading through this material, I totally see why they use it.
Yeah.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are unpacking a really substantial set of notes on cross-cultural wisdom and humility. And the big headline here is that relying on that idea, on what works here will work there, is basically a recipe for disaster.
It really is. The texts we're looking at call this the dangerous assumption. When we assume our specific way of doing things is the universal way, we don't just end up with, awkward moments at a dinner party.
Right.
We end up with broken trust, failed business ventures, and ineffective humanitarian aid.
And just to frame this for everyone listening, we're not talking about cultural etiquette today.
No.
This isn't a deep dive into whether you should bow or shake hands or kiss on the cheek. I think we often stop there, don't we?
We do.
We think, oh, I read the Wikipedia page on custom, I'm good.
Right. That's the surface stuff. That's just the manners. What we're trying to get at is the deep architecture. The sources today are interested in how different people actually perceive reality, the lens through which they see the world. Because if you ignore that depth, you don't just make social mistakes, you risk falling into what the authors call cultural imperialism.
Okay, we are definitely going to get to that term because it is heavy and it carries a lot of historical baggage. But let's start at the foundation. I want to look at how these sources define culture.
Good place to start.
Because usually when I hear that word, I think of food, festivals, maybe traditional clothing. But the text says that is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, it is the visible 10% above the waterline, absolutely. But the text defines culture much more broadly. It describes culture as the lens through which we interpret reality.
Right.
It's the invisible script that tells us what's moral, who has authority, and even who we are as individuals.
Mm.
And what's fascinating is that the sources trace this right back to the beginning.
To Genesis. This was the first aha moment for me in the reading. The concept of the cultural mandate.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've always viewed culture as something humans just sort of drifted into, or worse, as a distraction from spiritual life. Like, real life is praying, and culture is just the noise we make in between.
That's a common dualism, but the text argues that culture is actually part of the imago Dei, the image of God.
Okay.
When God told Adam to cultivate the garden and name the animals, that was the first act of culture making.
So when the text talks about Adam and the garden, it's not just a biology lesson. It's about categorization.
Exactly. Think about what naming is. It's not just sticking a label on something. It's assigning meaning. It's organizing the world.
Sure.
Humans are designed to be meaning makers. We arrange our world. We create systems. We tell stories. We build cities. That is all culture. It's a reflection of God's own creativity flowing through us.
So culture, in its raw form, is good. It's what we are wired to do.
But there's always a but.
There's always a but. In these deep dives, the sources quickly pivot to the distortion. Because clearly not all culture is benevolent. Some cultural habits are. Well, they're destructive.
Right. While the capacity for culture is good, the fall distorted it. And the classic example the text points to is the Tower of Babel.
Which is usually taught as a story about the origin of languages.
Yeah.
Right. But the notes here frame it as a story about power and uniformity.
Look at the motivation in that story. Let us make a name for ourselves.
Right.
Babel represents culture weaponized for pride. They wanted to build a tower to the heavens to consolidate control and ensure everyone stayed in one place, doing one thing, speaking one language.
It is a totalitarian attempt to eliminate diversity.
That's it. A chilling way to put it, but that's what it was.
So God confusing the languages wasn't just a punishment. It was almost a protective measure against that kind of monolithic power.
In a way, yes. So now we live in this tension. Every culture, whether it's French culture, Japanese culture, or Silicon Valley culture, is a mixed bag. It has echoes of God's creativity, the good stuff. But it is also shot through with human brokenness, fear, power struggles, idolatry.
That is such a helpful nuance. It stops us from swinging between two extremes. On one side, you have the person who thinks, my culture is perfect and yours is weird.
Of course.
And on the other side, you have the view that all cultures are exactly the same and valid in every single way.
Right. The text seems to say, no, every culture is a mix of beauty and brokenness, including our own.
And that realization is the only thing that protects us from the trap we mentioned earlier.
Cultural imperialism.
Let's unpack that term.
Yeah.
Because in this context, it's not necessarily about, an army invading a country. It's something subtler that happens in our heads.
Oh, it is much subtler. Cultural imperialism, as defined here, is the often unintentional belief that my way is the universal way.
Okay.
It happens when we confuse the message like the truth or the gospel or even just a solid business principle with the packaging, which is our specific cultural expression of it.
The sources gave a really sobering historical warning about this regarding colonial Christianity. It's a tough read, but I think we need to talk about it because it just illustrates the point so clearly.
It is difficult, but it's necessary history. The text discusses how missionaries in the, 19th and 20th centuries, often with genuine zeal and love.
Good intention.
Exactly. They would arrive in a new place and essentially outlaw local customs. They would suppress indigenous languages and impose European dress and manners.
Because in their minds, wearing a suit and tie or singing hymns in 44 time with an organ was part of being a good Christian.
That's it.
They couldn't separate the faith from their Victorian culture.
Precisely. They mistook European cultural norms for biblical fidelity. And the cost of that was enormous. The gospel came to be seen not as a message of liberation for all people, but as a tool of foreign domination.
The message got lost because the packaging was so heavy and foreign and, frankly, oppressive. And before we get too comfortable thinking, well, that was 100 years ago, we are much smarter now, the sources point out this happens today, all the time.
Constantly.
I see this in the corporate world constantly. We call it best practices, but often it's just Western practices.
It's everywhere. Think about a global nonprofit or a multinational tech company. We impose efficiency models, direct communication styles, or strict timelines that work in New York or London.
And when those don't work in a context that values relationship over speed,
Right.
say in parts of Latin America or the Middle East, we assume the local team is lazy or resistant.
Exactly.
Right? We say they aren't hitting the KPIs or they beat around the bush too much.
And we don't realize we are demanding they adopt our culture just to get their jobs done. We are confusing professionalism with acting like an American.
That is the core of the error.
Yeah.
It's the imperialism of the self. So if the problem is this pride, this inability to separate our cultural packaging from the actual truth or what is the solution, the text pivots to a theological concept that I found really compelling. A Greek word, kenosis.
Kenosis. It comes from Philippians chapter 2 in the New Testament. It refers to the self-emptying of Jesus.
This is the incarnation model.
Right. And we need to pause on how radical the text says this is. If anyone had the right to impose a culture from above, it was God.
Of course. He has the ultimate high culture.
But the text points out that God didn't shout instructions from heaven. He didn't demand we learn the language of angels to understand him.
He didn't send a PDF of universal best practices. He became a baby. He entered the chaos.
He entered a specific culture, first century Jewish Palestine. He spoke Aramaic. He ate local food. He functioned within the community structures of that time.
He entered from below, not from above.
That's the phrase.
Yeah.
He identified with people before he taught them.
That distinction, identifying with people before teaching them, seems to be the key takeaway here. The text describes it as moving from being a conqueror to being a guest.
Yeah.
I really like that metaphor.
Yeah. Think about the difference in posture. A conqueror demands the environment change to fit them. They rearrange the furniture, they set the schedule.
Right.
A guest adapts to fit the home they are entering. Kenosis means laying down your power and privilege. It means suspending your right to be right about how things should be done so that you can actually connect with the person in front of you.
I love that image. But I want to make this practical because I can't just reboot my brain and forget my own culture. I still have my instincts. If I'm a guest, I still need to know how to read the room.
Absolutely.
The sources introduce the concept of reading the worldview. This gets back to that iceberg idea. If I want to practice kenosis, I have to understand what's going on under the water.
This is where we move from the philosophical to the tactical. If surface culture is the tip of the iceberg, the worldview is the massive chunk of ice underwater. The text outlines three major, call them operating systems, that govern how most of the world functions.
Okay, let's run through these. I think this is the most useful framework in the whole packet because it explains so much global friction. The first one is guilt innocence.
This is the one most common in the West, North America, Northern Europe. It's likely the one you and I operate in by default. It focuses on laws, rules, doing it right.
Is this action legal or illegal?
Exactly. Did I break the rule? Justice, in this worldview, is about punishment or acquittal. It's very individualistic.
Right, it feels very linear. If I run a red light, I am guilty. If I pay the fine, I am restored. It's transactional.
Yeah.
Even our theology often sounds like a courtroom drama.
It does.
But then you have honor-shame.
Which is the dominant operating system for a huge portion of the world, the Middle East, parts of Asia, Africa, Latin America. Here, the focus isn't on an abstract rulebook. It's on relationship, reputation, community standing.
So the worst thing isn't breaking a rule, it's bringing shame upon your family or your group.
Yes. The text mentioned the story of the prodigal son here.
Which I've always read as a story of forgiveness of sins. A very guilt-innocence reading. You know, he broke the rules, he came back, Dad forgave him.
Right.
But the source argues that for the original audience, the scandal was about honor.
Completely. In an honor culture context, for a son to ask for his inheritance early is essentially saying, I wish you were dead.
Oh, wow.
It is a massive public shaming of the father. He destroys the families standing in the village. So when the father runs to meet him at the end...
Which dignified older men in that culture absolutely did not do.
They did not do that. The father is humiliating himself, taking the shame upon himself to protect the son from the village's scorn and restore him to the community.
So it's not just a legal acquittal. It's a restoration of status.
That's it. If you miss the honor dynamic, you miss the emotional weight of the story completely.
That is mind-blowing. I've read that story 100 times amidst a core cultural mechanic. Okay, and then there's the third one, which I think is the hardest for Westerners to grasp. Fear power.
This is often found in animistic or tribal contexts, but you see elements of it in folk religions everywhere. The focus is on navigating spiritual or political hierarchies. The world is seen as a dangerous place full of spirits, curses, or just powerful enemies.
So you don't need forgiveness from guilt or restoration of honor primarily. You need a stronger power to protect you from fear.
That's the core need.
So here's the practical application. If I come in with my guilt innocence backpack, my clear rules, my contracts, my HR policies, and I try to lead a team that operates on honor shame, I'm going to crash and burn.
You absolutely will. Let's say an employee makes a mistake. In a guilt culture, you pull them aside, you objectively state the rule they broke, and you expect them to fix it. Pure logic.
Right.
But in an honor culture, that conversation, especially if anyone else knows about it, is perceived as a profound shaming.
So instead of fixing the error, I've just declared war on their identity.
Basically, you haven't just corrected a behavior, you have severed the relationship. They might withdraw, or the whole team might turn against you to protect their collective honor.
Because you're solving a problem they don't think they have, with a tool they don't value.
Precisely.
That explains so many failed meetings I've heard about. The text actually gave a fantastic case study of how to do this right. It points to Paul in Athens from Acts 17.
This is a masterclass in cross-cultural engagement. Paul walks into Athens, a city full of idols. Now, a typical zealous reaction might be to
Smash the idols.
smash the idols, or stand on a corner and scream judgment. You guys are wrong. Listen to me.
Conqueror mindset again.
Exactly. But Paul doesn't do that. He observes. He walks around. He reads the city, and he finds an altar dedicated to an unknown God.
He finds the connection point.
He affirms their spiritual hunger first. He says, I see that you are very religious. He validates their longing.
Right.
Then he engages in what the text calls critical contextualization. He affirms what is good, their desire for the divine, and then he reframes their story toward the truth. He didn't start by tearing down. He started by reading their worldview.
It's amazing because he quotes their own poets. He uses their own cultural artifacts to explain his message.
He's speaking their language, literally and metaphorically.
And that requires incredible humility.
Yeah.
You have to respect a culture enough to study it before you try to speak into it. You have to believe that God might have left some fingerprints there before you arrived.
Which brings us to the how. Because this sounds great in theory, but it's hard to do in the moment. The sources emphasize that we need a specific skill for this. And it isn't learning to conjugate verbs or eat spicy food.
It's listening.
But not just waiting for your turn to speak, listening. The text frames listening as a spiritual discipline. It quotes James 1:19, quick to listen, slow to speak.
Which is the opposite of the social media era, isn't it? We are usually quick to speak
Yeah.
and we don't listen at all.
Precisely. The text introduces a term from anthropology called thick description.
I highlighted that. It sounds like describing a milkshake, but what does it actually mean in this context?
Thick description means observing behavior not just as a physical action, but within its context. The classic example is a wink. A thin description is, that man contracted his right eyelid. That tells you nothing about what happened.
Right. It could be a tick or dust in his eye.
A thick description figures out the meaning. Is he conspiring with a friend? Is he flirting? Is he mocking someone? You have to know the social code to know what the wink means.
So applied to culture, it's observing without immediate judgment. It's pausing the narrative in your head that says, that's wrong or that's inefficient, until you understand the code.
It means stopping the rush to fix. Especially if you are sent somewhere as a leader or an expert, you feel paid to have the answers. You feel pressure to implement the solution on day one.
That is the trap. The expert mindset says, I have the solution, I just need to implement it.
Right.
The learner mindset says, I need to discern what is actually happening here before I open my mouth.
It shifts your role entirely. You stop trying to be the exporter of truth, the person shipping containers of wisdom from the West to the rest.
And instead, the text says you become a translator and a steward.
Right. You are translating the eternal truth into the local vernacular. You are stewarding the relationships. It basically says, stop trying to be the hero of the story. The hero is the truth or God. You are just the connector.
And that all connects back to trust. If people feel heard, if they feel you understand their honor-shame dynamic or their fear, power, or concerns, they trust you. If you just come in with your rule book, you're just another imperialist.
And this brings us back to the stakes we talked about at the beginning. If we don't do this, if we don't practice this kenosis, this self-emptying, we end up with a gospel or a business strategy or a leadership model that looks like us, not like the truth.
We end up creating mini versions of ourselves
Right.
rather than empowering people to be who they were meant to be.
Exactly.
So as we zoom out, what is the ultimate goal here? The source material points us toward a pretty epic vision from Revelation 7.9.
It does. It paints a picture of the end of history. And what do we see? We don't see a generic, uniform mass of humanity where everyone has been blended into a beige sameness.
No.
We see a multitude from every nation, tribe, people, and language.
That is significant.
Mhm.
It implies that our cultural distinctiveness isn't just a temporary hassle we have to deal with on Earth.
Right. It suggests that diversity is preserved in eternity. Our distinctiveness is redeemed, not erased. We aren't all flattened into one culture.
That means God actually loves the diversity of human expression. He loves the honor cultures and the guilt cultures and the power cultures once they are redeemed and aligned with Him.
That's the vision.
That really changes how I view my own backpack of cultural assumptions. It makes me realize that my way isn't the standard way. It's just one way. It might be a good way for my context, but it's not the only way.
And that is the final provocation I think we need to leave with everyone listening. We all carry that backpack. We all have beliefs or habits that we think are universal truths, but are actually just our own cultural preferences.
Like how we view time. I know I get irrationally angry when people are late. I feel like it's a moral failure on their part.
Exactly. But is being on time a moral virtue? Or is it a cultural value of the industrialized West because we view time as money? In other cultures, time is viewed as an event. You start when everyone is there. To start without the key people would be rude. So who is right?
That stings a little, but it's a good sting. Is questioning your boss disrespectful, or is it a sign of critical thinking?
Depends entirely on the lens.
So the challenge for everyone listening is to open the backpack. Take a look at what is inside.
And ask yourself, what am I imposing on others just because it makes me comfortable?
The most effective people in this global world aren't the ones who know the most answers.
They are the ones who ask the best questions and love across boundaries.
That is a powerful place to land. The gospel and reality itself is big enough for every culture, but it's way too big to be contained by just one.
Beautifully put.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. Hopefully this helps us all walk a little more humbly and listen a little more closely.
It's been a pleasure.
Catch you on the next deep dive.